Right, welcome back to the DTW podcast with me, DT. So today I'm delighted to have another good Cork man. It's kind of becoming more and more consistent like Cork people. I'm sorry guys, it just is what it is. I like what I like, and tell me that this isn't an attractive accent. So, Jack O'Halloran, how are you, sir?
I am absolutely fan-fucking-tastic. How are you?
Well, look, in 2020 you're doing well. I'm delighted to hear that. I am also, would I say fantastic? I'm good. Would I say I'm that good? Sure, look, I probably am. Life isn't bad, Jack. Life isn't bad. But again, it's probably again down to this lovely acoustics that I'm hearing right now. They say we have this melodic kind of, it's almost a song that we sing as Cork people, but look, I like the sound of it. So, Jack, look, I know you, but what I might do is give you a brief introduction to the audience, just to give an idea of what it is that you do with your life. And then what I might hope that you might be able to do is that introduce yourself a little bit more in detail, or maybe tell me where I've gone wrong. A lot of people have, but also in terms of the introduction I gave, maybe we might go a little bit deeper. So, Jack O'Halloran, as I said, Cork man, there's no hiding it, but you are the owner and founder of Life Fit Studios. So, tell me about that. How did that come about? What is Life Fit Studios? What did you, when you set up that business, what were you thinking of? What were your ambitions? And maybe give the audience an oversight as to what you do with Life Fit Studios.
Okay, where to start? So and we were talking the other day about connectivity and kind of the power of it and things like that, and the importance of networking and reaching out to people. I guess when I came out of physio college, I had a huge passion for pain science, largely because there's such misperceptions in the world around what pain is and what causes it and what to do with it. So I was posting quite a bit on whether it was pain science articles or opinion pieces, whatever. And I got a message one day from my now business partner, John Phelan, basically saying he loves what I was doing, he loves my message, and he wants to help me in that tribe. So we met up in a bar that I was actually working in part-time at the time to help build my business, and sure, we all do that.
Absolutely.
We got chatting, and it kind of went from there. Then he was in with the Cork Parkinson support group. So then the two of us started working together there. Now, where the studio, the need came out of it from was when I came out of college, I felt I had a lot to share with the world. I felt I had skills and knowledge and, at least an eagerness and a passion to help people.
Brilliant.
But I didn't really have the space to do it from, or at least I couldn't perceive the space to do it from. So anyway, myself and John were coming back from Cork Parkinson support group. One day, it was around the end of February. And it's funny how you throw yourself into things. It was only I think the day before I'd only come out of a 6-7 year relationship, and it was just, everything was hectic. And we were on the way back and we were talking about clinic space, and John was in town at the time. I was renting in Grange 2 days a week, and then working in the bar to try and help build clientele and sustain that. We looked it up and we saw Ballygarvan House were renting out what used to be their old showroom for the Cork bar furniture. And I so happened to know the owner. I grew up 100 yards from their family, and I was like, Jesus, in my typical nature, it kind of got an idea, and I was like, right, just check this out. I'm very spontaneous in that sense. So we went up literally within 10 minutes of that. It's less than 2 kilometers from my home, and fell in love with it. Absolutely fell in love with the space. 2 kind of rooms that were previously offices, and we were like, this is perfect for treatment room for the intimate stuff. And then there was a nice hall space, and it was, it couldn't have been more of a perfect space. It was good for a price point. Now, it would have taken a lot of work for us to get it right and all of that, but it kind of forced ideas upon us. It kind of forced us into thinking, right, what way are we going to do it? So we now have a big space.
Nice.
And a big space that we don't necessarily totally need for ourselves. So taking that place I was in, which was coming out of college, eager to help and work, I was also empathetic, thinking there must be a lot of people like me too, who were looking for a space for help. So we designed it with that in mind. We put a nice little social corner with a kettle and microwaves and a big shelf of tea, couches, the whole shebang. So to get that kind of a social ethos in. We were getting big kind of inspiration from places like Cafe Move and places like that at the time. So we set that up with the idea then to be running workshops, classes, one-on-one, physio, nutrition. John as well does a lot of bike fitting, big into triathlons, running, the like. So we got treadmills, so to get into different performance analysis. So that was, we got the keys in around May 2018.
Okay.
And I nearly killed myself with work. I was getting up in the morning at 5 o'clock. I was going up to the studio. I might have had to be in the pub for 9:30 in the morning till about 4, straight back to the studio till 3 or 4 a.m., go home for an hour sleep, back to the studio, painting, carpentry, done everything.
Fair play to you, man.
On an absolute shoestring. I was in about 30 grand of debt from college. But
oh, man.
So we drove on, and it took us about a month and a half. And I guess after that, then, you know, because when you're on any long-term journey, you're waiting for the gratification. You know, you don't have the instant gratification, and you have to keep yourself in check that it's coming. Absolutely. And next thing, I was landed. I had a big, massive lump on the side of my face, abscess, and I didn't get out of bed for 2 months.
Shit, man.
I was probably closest to death I ever was, and it was just from overwork. Having, you know, pushed other things aside and different things like that.
And mate, like that is something that I'm fierce interested in now, because like I, like you, would be in the kind of the health professional kind of sphere, and we wanting to help others, but if we don't help ourselves first, what good is it, right? And with the best intentions, we can overwork ourselves or stretch ourselves too thin, and then nobody benefits. So that kind of leads on what I was hoping to ask you was, like, you know, in your area of expertise and like what you do professionally, like, you know, stress management is something that I feel as though we all have to learn, whether it's we learn it the easy way or the hard way, we all learn it, right? And everybody out there, I think right now, especially this year, are dealing with stressors that they may not have had before. Now, you kind of alluded to the fact that, like, when you set up your business, like when we all do, you have to, you know, put in the extra hours, etc., etc. And your lifestyle at that point wouldn't be considered to be, you know, a lot of the population don't have to do that out of necessity, but individuals like you and I do. But that makes it even more important that we look after ourselves through self-care, stress management, and hope. And with that, you know, by us allowing ourselves to be a little bit more compassionate and helping ourselves, we get to help others afterwards. But would you have any kind of insight in that regard? What works for you? What would you recommend for people that might be, you know, or encountering stress at a higher level or at a different level than they had before? What would you recommend?
Probably the most important thing, and I like to think of most problems in this sense, is before we get to solutions, we actually have to understand what the problem is. And I think it's a good place to go with, right, what is stress? Now, and I want to put into this, I want to put in pain, injury, mental health stress, you know, stressful emails, calls from your boss. It's all the same. Where it can manifest, whether it manifests into tears or chronic pain, or you know, you lashing out at someone you love, that kind of can change from stress to stress, and with you know, each different stress. So I think it's about bridging that a mental stress, an emotional stress, or a physical stress. They're all actually the same thing. So probably the biggest eye opener I had, and quick plug here, I had the fella who guided me through that eureka moment, or slap in the face moment, depending on what side of the spectrum on that you want to look at it, was Nilo Muraku. So he's a Wim Hof breathing instructor. Iceman. And I was at one of his workshops down in Manan Bridge in Cork about a year ago. I think it was about July 2019. And we'd spent the morning breathing, and it was about breathing all the way in and all the way out. Now, we then, at the end of the workshop, we went to do our ice baths, and I was so eager to get going. I was the first one in. And the idea of this is, if you can let your exhale just be completely relaxed, then it's a good sign to say that your nervous system is tolerating whatever the stress is, whether it's somebody massaging your hamstring and digging into you, whether it's ice cold water on your skin, or whether it's an email that you don't like to read. So we can listen and learn to listen to our exhale. And if our exhale can just go, just fall out, They call that in equine science and the likes, they call that a Schnauben. It's a German term. And what it is, you know, that, now you don't have to make the lip sound, but it's this idea that the exhale can come out fully. So I hopped into the ice bath, took my breath in, and went to exhale, and I was stalled, and it was like I'd completely forgotten all I'd learned in this workshop. And Niall was crouched down in front of us, you know, looking into the eyes, and he was all this, and it just made me remember. I was like, in my head, I was like, God, what an idiot! Why the hell did I forget? So the next breath, not even 5 seconds later, I breathed it all the way in, and I just focused on. And I swear to God, I did not feel the cold. I felt like I could have stayed in there all day long. No, because there was about 20 odd of us and 3 bats. I had to get out. So,
and is that something you think is that something that, like, from that learning experience in the ice cold bath, is that something that you can bring yourself into other environments and still get a benefit from that kind of breathing mechanism for?
100%. So what I've done, and it's usually influenced my therapy style now. So whether I'm working with a patient or a client and I'm doing some soft tissue work, or I'm getting them to do a particular exercise, the idea is one, and it's same with pain, same with stress. It's far more of a spectrum than it is just one thing. And because our brain will work, like our subconscious brain can't distinguish metaphor from reality. When we say, I have pain or I have stress, you know, there's a difference between a thorn in your finger and childbirth. There's a major difference. But the human brain, when you say pain, it just says, oh, right, here's your protective response. Yes. So first important thing with any stress is to quantify it. So I personally use a scale of 1 to 10. 10 being, you know, uncontrollable, just horrible stress. 1 being hardly nothing at all. And then there's this idea of a zone of proximal development. So it's that area where you're comfortable. So say, for example, if you were a darts player and you were trying to hit the bullseye. Well, if you were 2 feet from the darts board, you could hit the bullseye 9 times out of 10, 10 times out of 10. And once you have that,
I'm not 1 out of 10. Those are the sports. No, that doesn't suit that. Go on, continue.
So it's this idea. So you get to where you're 9 out of 10, 10 out of 10, and then you take another step towards difficulty. Whereas too many people will throw themselves way too much into the uncomfortable situation and end up actually just scaring their nervous system. And then their nervous system, without knowing it, or without the conscious brain knowing it, will cause them to get into protective measures. So whether you are exposed to whatever stress it is, again, a horrible phone call or freezing cold or somebody digging into your hamstring or whatever it is that try and get to that sweet spot. And that sweet spot is usually somewhere, and it's subjective, but usually somewhere between 4 and 6. Now, it can be quite difficult to self-induce this, but if I could walk somebody through a literal physical example, if you were to take your thumb and dig it into, say, your forearm muscles, and you wouldn't be long finding them quite sore. Now dig it in and try and find a number out of 10 of, say, 5 or 6. So it's stressful, but it's not crazy.
Yeah, conscious of it. It's sore, but it's not like I can still hold the conversation, but I'm conscious of the pain. I'm
conscious of it. Yeah, so it's tolerable, but your nervous system is getting a little antsy. So what I want you to do now is I want you to take a deep breath all the way in, and just leave it fall out. So, and a big thing with this exhale is not to push it out, not to try and control it out. Just leave it do what it wants to do. And what you'll notice, if we try that, it's easier when somebody else can do this for you, because when we control our own stress, it's not actually that stressful. But if we're at that 5 or 6, deep breath all the way in, leave it fall out. Do 2 or 3 of those, and then ask yourself the question, what number is it now? And I'd all but guarantee it will no longer be the number that it was.
It goes down, you're right.
It goes down. And you can apply that to absolutely any form of stress.
Wow. And the breath, it's just through that breath, that simple process of exhaling.
Yeah.
Wow, man.
Now, there's other hacks too. I mean, the breath is one, because really what it is, when we're stressed, and you know yourself, it's an external stimulus that we perceive as stressful. So what we do in a stressful moment is we attribute our whole sense of being to something that's outside of ourselves. which means that we're operating from a lower sense of self-efficacy. We feel in less control, we feel more scared and all of that. So in any sense of stress, what you're actually trying to achieve is you're trying to bring yourself back into control. So that's generally the ball game. So anything that there's breath is one, because breath is a fantastic way to connect with yourself. It's the first sign of life, is if you're breathing. Another one is our vision. You often hear the phrase, and men are more prone to this than women are, but you often hear the phrase tunnel vision. When we get stressed, we narrow our focus.
Yeah.
Now, an interesting thing about that is the areas of the brain that control our peripheral vision are the same areas of the brain that control the stress response. So if we're stressed, our vision narrows. But on the flip side of that, we can chicken and egg this, or horse and cart this, is we can intentionally widen our vision and practice having a better, wider field of vision that actually decreases our stress response.
That makes total sense. Because if you focus on a problem, all you see is a problem. Whereas if you change your perspective and you see the big picture, that thing becomes less relevant. But if all I see is that stressor, I'm causing myself pain and stress, maybe unnecessarily. Interesting. So is it like in terms of your advice there is like that we shouldn't focus so much on the thing that is causing us pain, or do we try to distract ourselves by bringing our perception elsewhere, or what's your advice in that regard? Is it a distraction thing, or is it kind of like getting kind of sort of perspective?
It's actually, in a sense, if you were to think, when we're stressed, we're actually distracted. So it's the other way around. When we're stressed, we're not present.
Yes.
And peripheral vision and what the breathing does is it brings us present. So if we're running through a forest late at night and it's dark, so we can't quite see around every corner, our nervous system, because it knows that there's loads of information out there. It knows this by default, that in every situation there's loads of information. But when we're in the moment where we can only see parts of it, then because look, at the end of the day, our nervous system's only goal is to keep us alive. And fear is a very important process. Fear is a very good thing. People kind of misassume that it's a bad thing. Inherently, it's a good thing. It keeps us. Is that it will assume that all the information we haven't gathered is danger. So things like peripheral vision, things like breath, things like becoming aware and present is actually about letting your brain and your nervous system calmly be objective about all the information around.
Okay.
And the body then, like the body corresponds, because if you picture a zebra, and a zebra is out in the Serengeti or wherever he is or she is, and she's there by a little water trickle. She's drinking away, and she has her little puppine or whatever they call the zebras.
I think it's called a zuppy.
A zuppy. That's a good one. Next to her, and in that moment, so she's drinking water, and she has her offspring next to her. So, like the body, because we have many processes in the body, we have physical sensation, audio sensation, visual sensation, digestive, energy, and so on. So what the nervous system is trying to do for any given context or any given situation is give ATP and energy and all of that to whatever area of the body that can help the body be most functional for that context. So if that zebra is drinking the water, things that might be important for her in that moment is the digestive system, maybe the audio canal so it can hear predators coming. There may be some sexual things going on because of, it has the offspring there and so on. So in that moment, there's not going to be much energy going to her legs and her shoulders and stuff like that. Now, let's flip the situation. All of a sudden, she hears something, or she sees a lion or a hyena or whatever it is. You may be damn sure she's not going to need to go, urinate, or she's not going to feel sexually aroused, or she's not going to be thirsty or hungry. Like her nervous system will change it, and it'll send all the energy and everything to her lungs, to her legs, to everything else. So our body
to get away,
always
to escape.
Yeah. So our body is always basically behaving in a way that is correspondent to the context.
Okay.
But the beauty about context is we have such a control over it because we can perceive it whatever way we want, in a sense. So, and you can take that very far, and people who really master the art. I mean, you have people who can literally drink snake poison and it doesn't kill them. No, I'm not saying for people to go that far. Really gain a control over your nervous system to where even if you're surrounded by complete and utter chaos.
Mm.
That you can train yourself not to perceive it as such.
Oh, nice. It's like, that steady ship in a storm. It's like, stress management. I remember somebody recently saying to me, it's a boat doesn't sink because of the water that's outside the boat. It sinks because of what it lets in. So if we were to be like that boat that refuses to let the stresses around us impact on us, well then, like you said, you're kind of bulletproof if you control your internal environment. That's really interesting, man. And I love that connection between nature and in general, and we're all just like, there's no separating us from nature. We are nature. So all of these things that that zebra would have felt, those emotions, or those response systems that the nervous system is presenting it through a predator, us as human beings are still experiencing those sort of responses right now in modern society. Isn't that correct?
Yeah, absolutely. And like, first and foremost, sure, we are animals,
Yeah.
We are designed to survive. That is it. And we can fill our minds and our conscious brain with so many logical processes. And, that's to do with our prefrontal motor cortex. The only difference between us and a monkey and us and a zebra, it's not that we have a prefrontal motor cortex and they don't. It's just that we literally have a bigger one. That's the only real difference. So it's a capacity thing. Now we're at a limitation to where we can't make it any bigger, or else we'll kill our mothers when we're born. But that's maybe where cloud technology and nano robots and the likes will begin to change that in time.
But I feel as though one of my neighbours here doing a PhD in something similar to that. No, we won't bring attention to it right now. But look, I need some more space for my neocortex. I'd like to grow it out. So maybe someday.
Maybe someday.
And is that like advantageous or disadvantageous? And your like subjective opinion, like the fact that we have such a developed frontal neocortex, as you've alluded to, like, does that cause just purely benefits, or is there some negatives to that as well?
I'd like to put it this way. So you can use a hammer to hit a nail, or you can use a hammer to hit somebody across the head. It's a tool. And with any tool, it's how we use it. So if we have a prefrontal cortex that's been programmed to be, self-empowering and to reinforce positive behaviors, positive lifestyle cycles, as you've taught of, then it gets better at that. But if we have it programmed, whether, this happened from our parents and so on, to be kind of self-critical and to always feel danger and perceive danger, then we can get better at that too. So it goes either way. It's just a matter of realizing, okay, this is a coin with both sides.
Yeah.
Once you realize that, well, what side would you prefer? And say, it doesn't matter whether I'm good, bad, or indifferent right now. I can learn things that can make me better step by step, day by day, if that makes sense.
Yes, it absolutely does. It absolutely does. And like that separation that you alluded to again with the neocortex. So would that be something that like, so that's what separates us from the zebra, as you alluded to, or the monkey, that they don't have the control, or they don't have conscious control over whether they use it positively or negatively, or the fact that we have one as such developed as human beings, that's something that no other organism has, and that would makes us human beings, essentially. Is that what we're saying?
Pretty much. Well, it's just a capacity thing, really. So as I said, so a zebra or a monkey will have that cortex too. It's just nowhere near as developed. Now there's other areas of a brain that we would have and they don't quite have, and there's area of the brain that an animal might have bigger. They might have a bigger amygdala or whatever. And it's probably just the way it all fell together, began to lend well for us, and being able to take something abstract, or take something like, we were speaking the other day about looking at a cup. And there's so much in that cup, and humans have an extra ability because of that extra prefrontal cortex to be able to see the thought above the thought above the thought above the thought. So then we can become the master puppeteer. And that's all about self-automation. That's about individuation. That's about beginning to see yourself as a machine.
Because like you said, it's the two sides of the same coin, and we all have that option, and we all have, the potentiality that we have in a positive sense could also be a negative depending on how we utilize that tool. And I love how you said there about the hammer. Like I did a phrase here, though, a guy with that only has a hammer sees everything as nails. And that is, you know, it is how we utilize these tools. And if we have this, and, you know, where we have this awareness, well, then sometimes the things that would cause us problems in modern society, such as stress and anxiety, when we realize that maybe that we have a little bit of control over them, and we don't have to, you know, consider them a life sentence if we are dealing with stress and anxiety at a daily level based on our environment. If we realize that we have some control over these tools, well, then there might be something that we can do about it to alleviate some of those pressures or to improve the situation for ourselves. And there's some great tips there that you gave in terms of like just getting an understanding of it, because I feel as though people don't. I only recently I would have considered myself to have an understanding of these things, and wouldn't it be great if this stuff was taught in school? Because it's just valuable. And when you see that, like the maybe emotional or mental responses, you know, it's all in line with the physicality and, you know, these physical things that we have that contribute, whether it's our nervous system or you know, even the size of our frontal cortex. It all contributes to these problems that I feel as though a lot of people are experiencing, especially right now. And
it's, you know, when I was in college and in physio and in chiropractic and massage and all of this, there's a bit of a modus of operandum change that's beginning to happen. No, this dates back to Rene Descartes, and I guess maybe a good area to start here.
Dualism.
Yeah, and this
first paragraph in my PhD is, you know, it's contributed to Descartes, but you know, interesting. Continue.
And what's interesting about it, and I kind of want to caveat into pain science a little bit here, is that Treatise of Man came out in 1664. And that was, I believe, 13 years after Rene Descartes had actually died. And that was largely to do with the controversy around his models at the time. So if you look at pain previous to Treatise of Man was this idea of, you know, you're either in the good grace or the bad grace of God, and you know, pray more or, you know, behave yourself and all of this, and you won't be in pain. And, you know, it's this idea, which, if you think about it, is a very much, I have very little control, and I hope to God I get the good grace, right? So
literally,
So it's just, you don't feel in any sense of control there. Then comes along Rene Descartes, and his model is basically like a hydraulic model of pain. So what it means is the intensity of the stimulus will dictate, like a hydraulic system, the amount of power that travels up through the nervous system into the brain and then back down as pain. We've believed that, and most people are operating from that belief system without even being aware of it. But if we, you know, it doesn't take much line of questioning to realize that can't be true, because, you know, we can have a catastrophic leg break that doesn't hurt when it hurts in the rehab. It can often not hurt in the moment. And then we have a paper cut that hurts like a motherfucker. So what's a very good place to start is, okay, then what is pain? So pain serves as, first of all, its function is to protect. And then, you know, so that's all it wants to do. It wants to keep us safe. So your level of pain is then always dictated by your perception of danger. So, for example, if I took a noxious stimulus, like a cold poker or a pincher or whatever it was, and I covered your view from your hands so you couldn't see your hands, and I pinched your index finger, and you might say that's 4 out of 10 or 6 out of 10. Let's just say it's 6 out of 10. And then I show you a blue or a green light and I do it again. You might say it's a 3 or a 2. And if I showed you a red light, you might say it's a 7 or an 8. So it's to do with perceptions of danger. And
and just the intensity of seeing that color, because red we associate with pain, so we're feeling pain more just as seeing color.
Absolutely, because red we associate with stop, danger, all those things. Now there's more to this. If you took a darts player, to stay on darts, and a soccer player, and if you hit them both at the exact same intensity across their hand, the darts player would feel more pain than the soccer player. If you hit them across the leg, the soccer player would feel more pain. Why is that? Well,
because the darts player needs his hand, and the soccer player needs his foot. Okay,
absolutely.
So the threat is greater based on their kind of how relative. Yeah, nice, man. That is interesting.
So it's entirely context dependent, and most people are coming in the door with this idea of, first of all, they don't even imagine themselves that they have control over the context. They don't imagine themselves that they're walking in with a toolbox that they can learn tools. They're coming in the door in the Cartesian kind of mentality where I'm broken, I need a mechanic to fix me so that I can switch off my brain and then they'll just do all the work and fix me. Problem with that is you develop a dependency. You actually, and there's this huge area, a big area in physiotherapy and in pain that's a big risk factor for future pain is known as iatrogenics. That's where basically previous treatment can be a big risk factor for future pain. And it's not saying that there's treatments out there that are bad or anything, but it's, so say for example, and many people might resonate with this, I have a low back pain and I come in and the person tests me and they say, yeah, your hip is out of a line, right? So now you're attributing your pain is the problem is your hip's out of line. Then the physio, chiro, whatever it is, mechanic, if you will, in this way of thinking, says, I'm going to put that back into place for you. Now, they could pretend they put it back into the place and just use placebo and it would still decrease your pain. So now
because you're being told by an expert in your head, the expert is filling me, the mechanic is fixing the car.
Yeah, so you have the letters after their name, the white coat, it reassures you, it makes you feel safe. So now you leave and instead of being in 6 out of 10 pain, you're in 2 out of 10 pain. And that might last a week, 6 weeks, 10 years, whatever it is. And now the same things are going to happen. So the next time the signals are coming up from your nervous system, you're in a particularly stressful context, the brain is going to go, oh, my pelvis must be back out of a line now. Pain. You're back into it. Now, to then say, right, how does pain actually work? Well, you have many different types of nerve fibers. You have C nerve fibers, A delta, A beta, all of these different types. And they just, they have different levels of myelination, which is basically how a wire or nerve is insulated. The more insulation it has, the faster the signal travels.
Yeah.
So say, for example, again, I get a stimulus on my hand. That then travels up to the brain. And all it actually does is it says, hey, buddy, this is what's going on. So there was, in the British Medical Journal, this case from, I think, around the early 90s, 29-year-old builder arrives into the hospital in agony. He had a 6-inch nail right up through his boot. Absolute agony. They gave him a Dazalam, a couple of other sedatives, morphine, things like that. When they eventually got the boot off them, the nail had gone between his toes. It hadn't even pierced the skin. But his perception was, nail through the boot, it must be through the foot. Now, 29-year-old builder, he might have had kids at home. And his need to work meant his kids' safety, his wife's safety, his all of this, his being able to afford his few pints and blah, blah, blah. And the nail would be a direct threat to his entire existence.
Yeah.
And it's how we're paying. So that's where, like...
So it's like how relative it is. The context is like, how potentially damaging could this be to our existence that causes us that pain? So even though it didn't go through the foot, the potential of that injury and the significance of it and how other people would, their livelihood would be negated or damaged based on this, he felt that pain even though it wasn't real.
Yeah. And it gets crazier than that. I mean, we have things like phantom limb pain. People who don't even have a limb, yet they're still feeling pain in it. There's some really weird, interesting things with...
though. Like, it's so interesting, I find. Like, because this stuff I see over and over, right, is that, like, pain isn't like a punishment or suffering isn't a punishment. It's just an indicator as to do something wrong in your life or you're doing something incorrect. It's just like a red flag. Something is causing you pain, suffering, whether it's emotional, physical, it could be social. But if there's something causing you upset or suffering or pain, it's just an indicator. It's like, you need to change something in your life. Would you agree with that, Jack? Is that something that you would think about?
100%. Because if you're in pain, I mean, the reality is you probably don't like pain. Most people don't like it. So to then assume that it's an uncomfortable experience, we can make the assumption that we would rather be out of that uncomfortable experience. Now, what I would hope, the impact I can have in the world and what I'd hope I can add value to is to get more people to actually realize they're not this thing that is either broken or not and needs an expert to fix. That we are actually in control of how we own our own lives. Now, there's one major area that can be very powerful that we can all begin to do and begin to work on for ourselves. We can do this every damn day if we want. Is this idea, now I call the exercise body schema. I don't know what the actual proper name of it is, but it stems back to this idea that the brain and the subconscious brain, which by the way is our supercomputer. I mean, that transfers over 40 billion or 40 million bits of data per second, whereas our conscious brain, we're talking about 4 million. It's just
okay, right.
Is that operates, or it works through metaphor. So it doesn't take things objectively. So if somewhere in my brain I have an idea that, there's barbed wire wrapped around my spine or whatever, right? So then, even though that sounds crazy and it sounds nonsense, and most people are like, who the hell thinks that? When you try this exercise, you'll see just what your subconscious brain has programmed in. So what we do with this kind of a type of exercise is we say, right, pick an area. It can be an injured area or not, doesn't actually matter. So say, for example, we're going to say the spine. And so you close your eyes and, well, you don't have to, but you try to call out what you see. Now you're encouraged to be as artistic and flamboyant with your language as possible. And in effect, the more ridiculous it sounds, the better effect it'll have. Now that's not to say to force it. Now, for example, things I've heard back have been barbed wire wrapped around the spine, spine like the edge of a saw blade, blue flame in the hip, black grit in the shoulder, all these things. Now, because the person said that themselves, I mean, they didn't just pick those words out of nowhere. Those words came from inside, way deep buried down. And the brain will operate on those metaphoric levels. The reason being is we need to shortcut. We need to make shortcuts. We can't be objective all the time because we have to get about our day. If you come in and say, oh, I'm in pain. It's like, right, is that a childbirth pain or is that a thorn pain? So where is it out of 10? And then we say, okay. So if we can then find a way to get it down to that safe proximal zone of development, which is somewhere between 4 and 6. So if it's somebody who, because there's both sides of this, you might say, well, what if I'm in 9 out of 10 pain and I can't even move the limb or put in a stimulus? And this is the beauty of our metaphorical brain. This is where visualization works, is that we can imagine moving it and the brain can't tell the difference. So in terms of practice, right? So if you're a darts player, soccer player, piano player, whatever it is, you can actually get better at that. And this is proven. We can see prefrontal cortex activity in people who just imagine they're playing it.
Wow.
Yeah. And like, so whether we're imagining things or literally doing. So say I have somebody in and they're an 8 out of 10 pain. So I'm going to be like, right, I can't induce more stress to get them tolerable. So I'll actually have to try and find their level that's 4 to 6 out of 10. And sometimes that might mean, so if they have back pain, that might mean asking them to close their eyes and just imagine bending down. And the first couple of repetitions of that might even be antsy for them. Now, whilst they're going through, so this is the thing, you want to voluntarily or willingly put yourself into the thing that stresses you, whilst having something that you can use with it to help mitigate the stress response. So if I have somebody and they have arm pain and it's 6 out of 10, or sorry, it's, say 6, 5 out of 10, I might then amp that a little bit or induce under a controlled safe environment a little bit more stimulus whilst giving them, so I'm not actually doing the healing here, I'm not doing the fixing, I'm not doing anything, I'm just a provider.
But you're manipulating their kind
I'm
of
a facilitator in a sense. So what I'll do there is I'll get them, so they have an arm pain, I'll get them to a 5 or 6 out of 10. And then whilst they're there, their job is to learn how to tolerate that. So whether it's all the way in, or whether it's practicing their peripheral vision or whatever it is, then we get that down to a 3 or a 4. And we say, right, we now have this level of stimulus under control. Let's ramp it up. And let's ramp it up. And so it's a constant.
And how far can we go with that, Jack? How far can we go with that? Like, are there people out there that can, cope with and deal with a level of subjective, so like what you and I would, like just like physical torture, that we are aware that, like, subjectively these people should be experiencing physical, emotional, mental pain? Are there individuals on the planet that can maybe tolerate more based on these things that you're saying? And how far, like, is there any examples of people that can tolerate it at like a ridiculous level in terms of extreme pain?
Yeah.
And how do they do it?
How do they do it? Like anything, you have to willingly face the dragon to get the gold.
I
You
love
know,
that. You're the second
and
person on this podcast to say that to me, and
yeah.
it's bang on, man. That's a great metaphor.
Now, the most obvious person I can think of right now is Wim Hof.
Yes,
Like
Iceman.
this guy can stay in ice water for over 2 hours without his outside skin temperature even dropping. Do you know?
Like
So
that's mind-boggling for me. That is
yeah,
mind-boggling. I jumped into the 40 foot here back on my birthday back in March. I was in there about 2 seconds, and it was too
yeah.
much. I was like, "Get me out of here!"
So it's like think of stress. I mean, okay, so whether it's ice water for 2 hours or whether it's a slightly uncomfortable conversation with your boss, you know, and they're way different sides of that spectrum.
Mm-hmm.
But it's the
Both,
same.
both uncomfortable. Both
Yeah,
uncomfortable.
it's the same spectrum. And it's like, right, is it fair to say that whatever it is you're doing, whether it's practicing music, movement, stress mechanisms, whatever it is, practice makes better. Do you know? Step
Yeah.
by step, you get better. So it doesn't matter if you're coming in and you have a condition like, let's say, allodynia. Allodynia is something where you might have a feather on your arm and it feels like a burning flame. So our nervous system can get wired so much to where it perceives danger in a crazy level to where danger is everywhere. So whether you're that low down in the barrel, or whether you're Ronaldo or Messi and you're right at, you're right on the edge of your ability, it doesn't really matter. The principles are the same. Now, the difference is, say, if you're 400 pounds in weight, you might lose 50 pounds quicker than the person who's 200 pounds in weight. So the progress for somebody way down at the bottom, and this I hope will encourage them, can happen a lot quicker than it would for somebody like a Wim Hof, he's only going to make incremental gains because he's come so far, but he'll make gains nonetheless. You know,
Wow.
so. But the answer is how do you make the gains, whether they're huge gains or small gains, is willingly inducing yourself to something that's at the edge of your ability, and with enough time, you get there.
Perfect, man. And like we talk about this in personal training all the time in the fitness industry, you know, the principle of overload. It's like, if I'm going to make Jack better, you come into me and I make you do something harder every single time. And it might be just incremental, because it's not about what you're doing today. It's like what you're doing at the end of the program relative to how you began. But the only way we can make you better and stronger and fitter and faster is to make you work a little bit harder, just 1% harder every time you come in.
And it's so important to emphasize on that 1%. You know, well, you can say maybe 1 to 10%, to go into the deep end. So I want you to think about it. If you are a parent and you have a 4-year-old now, and you want to teach that 4-year-old to swim, do you bring it down to somewhere like Kinsale or Cossabe and hop in a boat, go way out into the middle of the Irish Sea and go, throw him in? Or do you take him or her to the swimming pool where he can see other children that aren't dying there and then in front of him, where he has armbands that help make feel safe, where you can hold their hand and you gradually bring the person from where they're at gradually towards more stimulus, more danger, so to speak.
Yeah, exposure.
Safely, in a controlled sense. So that's the most important thing. And to come at it with a sense of patience and kindness. And that's where people run into trouble, is they go from 0 to hero in no time. January being a great example of that. They go from the couch to the gym 5 days a week, and then they're wondering why they have, pain in their shoulder, arm, or whatever, only a matter of weeks later. It's because you didn't give yourself a chance to adjust to the stress.
Okay.
Now, to bring that in, and it does take time. I mean, we have to kind of break down what we are. I mean, we're 33,000 genes and about 240,000 different types of proteins. Now, our body, or the way we manifest, is the way our proteins have come together. Now, our genes, there's this idea, and you probably heard of the Genome Project, where, we think we're genetically predisposed to be X, Y, or Z. And yes, there is an element of that. I mean, it helps if you're 6'6", if you're going to play basketball. Those kind of things do help. But to a large degree, talent and things we learn they're developed. They're,
it's that nature versus nurture argument, right?
And there's a huge emphasis I would put on the nurture element of that. Of course, as I said, it helps if you're tall, if you're a basketball player. Of course, there is that element. So
like I heard this argument that it was something that stuck with me on the nature and nurture point, because it's just, I find it fascinating as a teacher, as an educator, and just you know, when I consider my own upbringing and things like that, it's like, right, like in terms of potentiality, where we're at. And I remember somebody saying to me, and it was something that resonated, is that like your nature or your genes might dictate the ceiling, but your nurture environment will dictate how close to the ceiling that you get. But the potential is set by the genes. Would that be something you agree with, or is that something that, what's your thought on nature versus nurture? Like, are like physical, personality wise, or IQ, intellect, like what we're capable of, do you think that is set at the start in terms of the bar? I'm not talking about what we're all doing. I'm just talking their absolute potential. So I'm 6'3", and my two brothers, you know, 6'1", 6', right? But my argument would be like, we're all this tall as guys because growing up we had good nutrition, we were exercising, we were out in the sunshine, and that environment, my potential could have been 6'5", but I got to 6'3" based on my environment and my nurturing from my parents and my family and my school. But if I had lived in a cave without any parents or without any sort of like that much nurture in a positive sense, I might have not met this 6'3" bar that I have based on my environment. So when somebody said that to me, and it wasn't just about like physiological or anatomical potential, is like in everything, what your personality is. Again, I mentioned IQ or like intelligence, that the environment dictates how close we get to our potential, the actual top out, but the top out, the ceiling is dictated based on, it was said at the start. Do you agree with that? Or
I do. And to bring the environment in there, biologically speaking, it's good to understand what our environment is in a biological sense. The environment is our blood.
Okay.
So we have our genes, 33,000 of them, that will manifest differently into a variety of 240,000 different proteins. Now, when the Genome Project started, it was assumed that we'd find about 240,000 different genes, because we assumed that our genes equals our protein expression. Now, to emphasize in that, protein synthesis is life. I mean, that is the definition of life. Now, so our 33,000 genes are operating within their environment, which is the blood. Now, the chemistry in all of that is what's telling the genes to manifest into, you know, whatever type of protein. Now, then we can ask ourselves, where does the blood get the chemistry from? And then that's the pineal gland. The pineal gland, what dictates the behavior of the pineal gland, or how can we influence the behavior of our pineal gland? And that is through emotion, through feeling. So if we are then to say, right, I want to, you know, expose myself to a certain type of stress. So I want to be a bodybuilder, that's a stress I'm going to expose myself to. I want to be a marathon runner, that's a stress I want to expose myself to. Is that we can, if we were clever about it, we'd make sure that our emotional state was also regulated whilst we were exposed to those stresses. And it is kind of a balancing effect with whatever stress we're having. So if I'm bringing someone to a 6 out of 10 with their arm pain, I want to balance that by them focusing on their breath, their peripheral vision, those kind of things too. Now, this is then where, you know, this I am that I am actually comes from, which is, you know, if you want to look like a marathon runner, what do you have to do? Who do you have to be? You have to be a marathon runner. There is no shortcut. If you want to look like a bodybuilder, you have to be a bodybuilder. You know, so whatever we put ourselves under, our body adapts to. Now, so if I'm shoveling all day long, I'm going to have calluses in my hand. You know, and that is just the reality of it. So however manifest we are, if we're manifesting with chronic pain, terrible mobility, and all of that, then that's because that's what we've practiced. If we're manifesting as Ronaldo or Messi or Wim Hof or one of them, because that's what we've practiced. And that's open, and that is a shared truth for everyone. I don't care if you're bottom of the barrel or on the top end. And the sooner we realize it, gain control of it, practice it, and develop it, then we can be whatever the hell we want to be.
Oh man, that is so empowering. Isn't that so cool? Like anybody listening to this now is like there's value in that. And I think people are like, maybe, you know, we don't expose ourselves enough to these stressors that, because we don't want to have that initial discomfort. But growth only comes from a position of discomfort. And the exposure, bit by bit, as you said, and you made lovely metaphors and lovely references in lots of different ways that it's relevant to different people or different environments or contexts, but that growth can't happen without that exposure and that discomfort, and then exposure and dealing with the initial discomfort. And that's where you come in, right? In terms of like dealing with it in the moment, that it's tolerable, and then you get stronger by making the next stimulants or the next stressor a little bit tougher to deal with. That's resilience, right? And all that's how we grow.
Yeah. And I mean, we can bring it back to just again biological process, because I like to bring some scientific truth into it, and then we can see how that correlates. Is that right for personal trainers out there and the likes, and people who go to the gym?
Yeah.
I mean, how do you grow muscle? You tear it first. So it's tear and builds. And the idea of that is wherever we break ourselves, we're actually stronger after. Now, where they found this out was desperately cruel. They got mice, and they went tearing mice's mice's, what, how do I word that? Their hamstrings. And they tried then to tear it each day after it was torn first. So they tried it after day 1, and they'd check where it would tear again. And they done that then day 2, 3, 4. And it wasn't until day 21 that basically the mouse's hamstring would tear in a different site. So by day 21 for them, where it previously broke was now stronger than everywhere.
Wow. That is interesting, man.
Yeah. So by tearing ourselves down, by exposing ourselves to what is uncomfortable, we literally make ourselves stronger.
And that's the only way, right? That is the only way we can do it. Is that correct? There's no shortcuts. You have
to.
There
is no shortcuts. Yeah. No, there are shortcuts in the sense of we can get clever about it. So, for example, if I have a big match on Saturday, but I've already been doing too much training, I need to be physically recovering, but I also kind of want to score 10 points on Saturday. What I might practice, I might go into bed and just imagine shooting and shooting and shooting and shooting and shooting. And that is still actually putting my nervous system through that myelination. Now, bring myelination in, and I'd reference a book here, one of the most empowering books I've ever read. It's called The Talent Code by a fellow called Daniel Coyle.
Okay.
It talks hugely on that nature-nurture battle, and would largely say, look, we are in some sense ceiling and dictated by our nature, but most of what comes thereafter is our nurture. And it's some mad interesting insights. It's like when you consider the likes of Messi, Ronaldo, or anyone for that matter, we're a reflection of our environment. So an interesting one is usually the fastest runners are the youngest in their family. And the reason,
tell me why.
When you're the youngest sibling, what are you practicing from a very young age?
Chasing after your brothers or siblings.
Keeping up.
Wow, man.
Another one is like political leaders. A lot of them tend to have been orphaned when they were a young age, because they would have had to assume a role of leadership a lot earlier. There's all these little
middle child syndrome. Come on, tell us about middle child syndrome. Asking for a friend. Why are we so fucked up?
Approval seeking. God, I don't know. I was the baby, so I had all the attention.
Oh yeah, look, you've all the sides of it. Go on.
But yeah, so that book, again, it gave me a fantastic insight into, right, because I had problems. I wanted to be better, but I didn't know where to start, and I was like in this rat race. And again, as I said earlier on, it's very important to understand what the problem is before you go solving it.
Yes.
So this kind of actually gave me the template and gave me the understanding of, well, what is it I'm working with? And how any skill works is an input into basically a load of wires. So if I wanted to throw a ball, my brain sends a signal down my arm to go to throw the ball. Now, each time I fire that, I wire it.
I'm going to catch in Dublin. Go on, truck. Got it.
So each time I fire that, I wire that, right? Now, here's then why, to bring back the zone of proximal development, why we shouldn't go straight into the deep end, is if we're practicing poorly, we get better at that too. So that's why, if I want to hit the bullseye, I want to get 9 times out of 10, right? So I want to, if I am only a foot away from the darts board, then get my 9 out of 10, then go a foot back.
That's what they say.
And that way I'm only practicing perfection.
Yes, I was about to say, I had a lecture in UL, physical education, back in the day, and it was like, he was always hammering home. It's like, practice doesn't make perfect. Perfect practice makes perfect. Yeah. Because if you're practicing with a poor skill and you do it over and over and over, you're not going to be able to do it any other way than you've been practicing. So if you want to do something well, you got to practice it with that level. Yeah. There was
one study, I can't remember the authors or when it was or whatever, and not
all
of the figures, but
I did that in my PhD all the time. I was like, just believe me, right? Don't look for reference.
Just believe me. But it was they took a basketball team and they split them into two, and they checked them all at baseline on free throwing. Okay. And what's your score in your free throwing? Then they took the two groups and they let one group practice free throwing for an hour a day for 3 weeks. They let the other group imagine practicing free throwing every day for 3 weeks. Brought them back together at the end, and both teams had got, I think the team that done it got better by, was it 24.2%, something like that. The team that imagined it got better by 23.8%. So basically,
Wow.
the same thing.
Wow, man. I've seen that study. So I do believe it, right? You're not talking about your ass. I've seen the exact same study. But isn't that so interesting, man? And doesn't it show like the power of the mind and what through like visualization and imagination that we can actually look, man. That is fucking fascinating.
But to bring in mental health to that, I mean, what's our inner dialogue? Am I telling myself and practicing in my mind, am I, Jack, you're an asshole, you're this, you're that, you're bollocks, you fucked up, all of this? I'm practicing, you know, I am abundant, I am strong, I am.
Yeah.
And so it's not only physical stress, it's not only for somebody who, you know, needs to make the most of, let's say, short time. So I have a big match on Saturday, but I can't necessarily go training all the time or I'll be wrecked Saturday. So that person being wise enough to do visual practice, it's also for the person who's, you know, trying to get control of their mental health. Because as I say, physical stress, mental stress, emotional stress, it's all just stress. They work under the same mechanisms, you know, and that's, you know, it kind of simplifies it an awful lot, really, because we think they're all so different, you know, and then we need to go to a specialist for each different thing. And it's like we can control so much of it ourselves if we know.
And that's the mechanic that you were talking about earlier. We can develop a dependency on them, but you know, we shouldn't have to. We took a bit of control and got it. But I think first comes with understanding and awareness. When we get when we realize that we have some control, it's only from that position that we can actually build upon it. But I'm all about that life, because if we take control and have some self-care regimes or self-love regimes and those manifestations and visualizations and those mantras that we might be discussing, we can change our world. And that's proactive. That's proactive self-care. We're not being passive and we're not being dependent on the mechanic or the doctors or the psychiatrist. We're kind of looking after our own car. And like, isn't maintenance more important than, you know, prevention, or almost our prevention and maintenance is more important than like trying to get it fixed afterwards. We can look after these things ourselves, I feel. And like right now, right? So COVID-19, 2020, like we discussed already that like the importance or the value in going through tough stuff, coming through the other side, and the resilience and that strength that we get from being in stressful situations. And now 2020, I feel as though have presented everybody with additional stressors in their lives that they wouldn't have had to experience before. And as difficult and all as it is, you know, it can lead us to be stronger, healthier people going forward, because, you know, everything is relative afterwards. Is there anything that maybe you would recommend, or like, you know, even getting that awareness, I'm sure has already helped loads of people, that there is some good and positivity from the negative experience that we might experience because it's making us stronger? Is there anything that you would recommend if somebody's out there right now and they're listening and they're like either suffering with stress or they're in pain, whether it's physical, mental, emotional pain, they're experiencing it right now, and this year lockdown especially has contributed to it? Is there anything that we can do, Jack, that you would recommend that, you know, physically, mentally, whatever, that might help our situation, just that we can do ourselves from home?
Well, I guess again, if we're to just be very generic and bring it in as if that's COVID is a stress, or whether it was 2001 and 9/11 was a big stress for everyone, or whatever it is, then again, the same principles, using our breath, using our peripheral vision, using all of that. Now, COVID, I mean, think about it. So it's very much, it had the same effect as what an injury would have. So imagine you're a GA player or a basketball player or soccer player, and you're in the middle of your season. So picture you're in that middle of the season. What does that involve? That involves you're probably meeting your buddies 2-3 nights a week. That involves, you know, there's such social attachments. There's such, you know, physical attachments. There's so many attachments that we gain safety from. We feel secure in. Next thing, I tear my hamstring. So now I'm disconnected. And it's disconnection from our tribe, disconnection from those around us that makes us feel unsafe. So COVID was just like an injury in that sense, because COVID, I know for me personally, like I was literally the week we got locked on, I was just about to release all dates for workshops for the year. We just started class timetables. Clients were starting to come in through the door. Loads of things were happening. And next thing, massive overload of disconnect. And disconnection makes us feel safe because we're separated from the tribe. When we ever find ourselves in a separated from tribe kind of a scenario, is to, as much as possible, practice and even imagine it, fake it if you have to, being connected to something. So whether that's, you know, the person in the house you were locked down with, whether that's the series that you decided to wormhole on or whatever, is to connect to it. So connection is, you know, what makes us feel safe. Now, and like personally, I mean, I was doing well at the start of the lockdown, and then I had a bit of a crash, you know, because I guess one other thing that's important with anything like when we disconnect, there is different stages to loss. You know, we need to come to an acceptance of it. We're in denial. We're bartering. We're doing all these
grieving a lot of time. I feel as though people that we can't accept what's going on and won't accept, and those are the people that are grieving. They're like always, you know, it's just like not acceptance of the situation and fighting against it. You know, where it's like, no, this is not 2020. This is not COVID-19. This is not lockdown. This is not pandemic. And that creates its own stress, right?
And I was certainly there. I mean, I was in denial because I didn't want to admit that I got the game wrong, you know, and then you begin to say, right, and you begin to accept the death of the old life. You begin to accept it, and you say, okay, and wherever, like death, and I just want to make the point, you know, and even in Western culture, we're very good at ignoring death, but death equals life. I mean, you can't have one without the other, and the more we become comfortable with the idea of death, and whether it's literal death of a loved one or whether it's a more metaphorical death of a business or a time of life, when we can, you know, see when we have the dead ground and we can recognize it, then we can begin to sprout new flowers and leaves. You know,
and that corresponding life, you know, like that was a lovely metaphor used there, but you know, with every person that passes away, there's a baby born, but in every opportunity that dies, there's another opportunity that presents itself. Like you and I have both pivoted to be doing podcasts, things like stuff that we wouldn't have time to do. But look, and it is what it is, without judgment. One door closes, another door opens, and who says what's better and what's worse? And I think that's a powerful thing, man, that other people can, if they could understand that during this year, is that, okay, it's just a different year. It's no better, no worse. It's just different based on the reality of our situation. And if we don't fight against it, and we look for that positivity, and we look for that opportunity that might be reborn, well, then it leads to opportunity and potential and positivity.
Yeah, and the truth is, like, it doesn't matter what happens to us. It's how we get over it. So whether it's an injury or a COVID pandemic, whatever it is. So, for example, right, now we're not in the same room, but if I were to throw a ball at you.
Yes, I love this as an idea. Come on, throw it back.
And it hits you in the face, right? So I threw a ball at you, it hit you in the face.
I got a mark in my head, but look,
I didn't mean to hit the iPad. But so I threw a ball at you and it hit you in the face. And your initial reaction might be, Jack is an asshole. So Jack is the problem.
Never.
He threw a ball at my face. No, let's just say I done it again. So second time I threw a ball in your face and it hit you in the face. And the third time, and the fourth time, and the fifth time. At a certain point, you must realize that it doesn't matter what I'm doing. You either have to duck, dive, dodge, or catch. So it is in our agency. It's in our own self-efficacy. It's in our confidence. So when we can say to ourselves, doesn't matter what the challenge is, I can rise to challenges. And that's where, to bring back like physio and personal training and pain and all that. That's why exercise is actually probably the best treatment. So movement is actually, because we often think when we're injured, I must rest it. No, not true. You must find the zone of proximal development. So if you have even a broken leg, you're supposed to get optimally loading it as soon as you can. And what that is to develop your confidence in that you are able to respond. You are able to adapt. So it's like we are adaptive creatures. So again, I'm here now, I'm gone a bit soft because I'm spending time in front of computers all the time. But if I decided to go out into the garden for the week and do a load of gardening, my body would adapt. I'd get calluses in my hand, my arms would get a bit bigger, and so on and so forth. So that's what we are. We are adaptive beings, and we forget that. And the more we can begin to be aware of,
I like that, man.
Score ourselves as an adaptive being and say, yeah, I'm a good adaptive being. I'm going to be a better tomorrow, and better and better and better and better.
And then it's like, come at me,
work.
word. It's like, what can you throw at me? I'm malleable,
Absolutely.
I'm flexible, I'm in flux, and I can move with it, as opposed, mate, that is fucking empowering. And like your movement, what you mentioned there, and I know you have a good insight into this, and like, you know, obviously I'm a PE teacher and a personal trainer and a fitness professional, but like, what is you mentioned in terms of like the value that you would put on movement in terms of like preemptive therapy or rehab or even prehab, like the value that exercise and movement gives to us as individuals. Like, what sort of emphasis or what sort of value, or why would you encourage people to move? If you would encourage people to move, why would you encourage people to move as often as possible?
Well, I guess I'm going to caveat here. I was asked a question yesterday. I was sent a message by a friend who recently has to engage in about 12 hours of sitting in front of a laptop, right? College work and the likes, and they're worried about back pain and they're worried about this. So they were like, what's the best posture, right? Now, you get this question so much. What is the best posture? Is being nice and upright the best posture? Is being, you know, whatever? The answer is there is no best posture. Movement and the variety is the answer. And that's where it goes back to our ability to adapt. We need to know we have variety in our ability to adapt. So movement is, and when we practice movement and flow movements, animal movements, all different, you know, and we get into a real sense of motor control, and we begin to, again, edge of our ability. And before we know it, we're doing tandem walk lines, we're doing handstands, we're doing monkey flips, we're doing whatever we're doing. Or maybe even just being able to sit on the floor might be difficult for you. And then in a couple of weeks, you can sit on the floor. You know, again, it's just challenging. So if you are stuck in one posture, what can happen? So say if take your perfect ideal posture that everyone has been told to do, that's perfect for your back and everything else. Well, if I'm here, it's like, right, I'm now here and I'm 3 out of 10. You know, there's some nervous stuff going on. I mean, we're online, we're vulnerable, we're this and we're that. Now I get a phone call from somebody who's not very happy with me. So now my nervous system is getting stressed. I'm still in this posture, by the way. Then somebody comes in and they roar at my face, and then I see an email, fuck, I didn't respond to that, I should have responded to that last week. Stress. So now this posture and all the muscles are beginning to learn and associate stress with that position.
Okay.
Where movement comes in and variety is it basically helps stop too much tension build up in any one area, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it does.
So we really want variety. We want to be constantly moving. So there is no right posture. Sit for a while, arch for a while, hunch for a while, stand for a while. Do it all, because if we can do it all and we can say, I can do loads of stuff. I am super adaptive. I can adapt to any situation. I don't have to, you know, put on my shoes any one way. I can do it 50 ways. Then again, we're building into this argument and we're building into this narrative that we are adapters. And I don't care what you throw at me, I can adapt.
Love that, man. Love that. And again, that's the empowerment you get from that. The environment doesn't dictate what goes on in my world. I dictate what's going on in my world. Mate, that's powerful. And that's, look, I think everybody listening now would get value in it, because I think it's so true, right? And like, Jack, I know now I've taken a lot of your time now.
Right, I love it.
I know that, and we can fucking talk. You know that when I spoke on your podcast recently, I just really enjoy our conversations, because they're just back and forth and I had a plan coming into this conversation. I didn't touch on any of them really, but I enjoyed the chat. But it's a beautiful thing.
We'll have many more, we'll get through them all.
Of course. I don't even care if we record them. I just want to talk to you. Well, look, man, and I think there's so many nuggets of wisdom there that people can just take and go with. And like, a lot of them is stuff that we don't conventionally hear. So I'm so glad that you're able to bring your perspective on things in terms of pain management, in terms of movement, in terms of stress management, and all the things that we can take into our worlds right now. But going forward, we'll come out of this pandemic. These are still going to be practical and still going to be useful, because like these things that can cause us pain, or like these painful experiences, are inevitable, but it's how we deal with them and how we cope with them and how our mindset around them is what will dictate how much we suffer, because pain is inevitable, but suffering is a choice. And I think you've given us a lot of kind of wisdom there in terms of how to deal with it. So I do really appreciate that. Before we finish up, Jack, okay, there's a couple of things that I would like to ask you. So I loved last week when I was talking on your podcast, you gave me the opportunity to maybe give a shout out to somebody out there that, you know, is trying to make the world a better place, or healthier, happier place, or they might have inspired you ask me who's out there that's doing great work that you find inspirational, and maybe we can give them a nod. And you had a term and praise it forward. And I really liked it because like the world can be quite a negative place, and there's no harm in spreading a bit of love and spreading a bit of appreciation. And no doubt individuals, when they hear themselves referenced or that they get that kind of kudos from another individual, they're going to feel good about it. So is there anybody out there that you would, I'll give you the opportunity now to praise it forward. Is there somebody out there that has been inspiring you and you appreciate what they do in the world?
There is loads of people, and I guess
choose one, Jack. Choose one.
Choose
and
one.
You can't say Danny Toomey, right? You can't say Danny Toomey. I won't accept it.
Well, look, I mean, to get in based on a lot of stuff we're talking about, I mentioned the likes of Daniel Coyle already. In terms of the pain science stuff, I recommend people check out the likes of NOI Group, Lorimer Mosley, Professor Peter O'Sullivan. There's loads of people there. If I can think to, I don't know, someone who, at least on a local level, who is heroic in a way they're going around COVID, and I like the way they're being themselves and still, you know, not letting COVID stop them, and, you know, suffering with having to fight with COVID and all of that, is Louise George of Douglas Yoga Centre.
Okay.
She's out there, she's kicking ass. She's starting up a new website, Yoga Connected, where she's
done,
getting
Louise.
on to, and just an amazing woman. I done a podcast with her as well, if you'd like to check it out. And
nice.
She really is. She's out there kicking ass, and yeah, so that's
brilliant. Well, look, I appreciate that, and I'm sure Louise will. And like, this is what we need to be doing. We need to be supporting, uplifting, applauding one another, because, you know, the world can be a sad and lonely place, and that connectivity, as you alluded to, is so important. And these, you know, ways to keep connected are important. And if we can give somebody a bit of a kudos or a bit of celebration, why wouldn't we?
Share that's wonderful. Share love, yeah.
That's it, man. And it's fucking nothing but love, and you know that, Jack. And like, my whole philosophy is nothing but love. Nothing but love. There's no space in this world for anything else. And, you know, we have control over whether we want to spread the love or we want to spread hate. And like, mate, I know what side of the fence I'm on, and I feel as though you do too. And it's a wonderful thing to see, man. And it restores our faith in humanity, because I think we read a lot in the media and we see a lot of negativity. There are more good people in the world. We're just not as vocal or as verbal, or as we're not as controversial. So nobody writes about us, but there are good people out there.
What's funny is, if you think, if based on what we were saying, if you're the type of person who doesn't see yourself as an adaptive being, doesn't see yourself as all of that, we always seek results in what's outside of us, and then we judge it's good or it's bad. Whereas when we're adaptive, we can be empathetic to somebody else who is also being adaptive, and then we can come at a place from true love. And
man.
So, you know, when we realize what we are, then we can really love, and we can empathize.
Love that.
See the work that goes on, you know.
And it starts with that self-love. And, you know, there's nobody out there that can spread love or to look after others without looking after themselves first. And this is all what you've spoken about today, man. So I really appreciate it. And people listening, you know, they'll get so much value from that. Now, Jack, is there a place where people can find you online, or if they wanted to reach out or get more information, or I'm sure this conversation now would have sparked a lot of interest. How can people find you, Jack?
People can find me. So our website is lifefitstudios.ie. I'm also on Instagram. My personal page is at Jack O'Halloran _IE. And then we're also at Life Fit Studios. We're on Facebook. I'd like if you could check out the Life Fit podcast.
Nice.
And maybe, you know,
there's a tall plonker from the Cork that's on it there recently. You might check that one out and tell me how you feel about it.
Yeah, we'll have that out fairly soon now. And we have 5 shows released already. I have another 4 recorded, ready to go, and a bunch more exciting interviews coming up. So that's my way of staying myself during COVID.
Well done, Jack. And if there's anybody you can stay yourself, because you're doing fucking great work out there, man. And like, we need more people like you. And, you know, I'm just so appreciative that you've taken your time out to chat with me. Again, we could talk and talk and talk. And this is the longest podcast I've ever recorded, but again, one of the best, because the value that we get, and I get, and anybody listening will get from your words of wisdom, it's empowering. That's the word I would use to define it. It's empowering, because when you take the power back and know that we're in control of more than we probably let on, or like that we perceive to be the case, well, then we can take action. Look, mate, I really appreciate you coming on, and you know that I really value you and what you're trying to do in the world. So as a guest, I'm really grateful that you're able to come on as a guest, and I hope you know that. And look, we'll return this again. We'll have more chats. And Jack and everybody else listening, I'll be back next week with another guest talking about something I know nothing about. And Jack and the rest of you know that it's nothing but love. Okay, Jack, thank you so much, sir.
Thank you. Pleasure as always.